Can I can we start off? We're on right now. All right. So welcome to today's webinar. Welcome to the Ireland Study Abroad webinar. Now we're going to look at everything about studying in Ireland. Okay, and then of course we're going to also look at the permanent residency pathway for international students. So I would like you to stay through on this webinar. You're going to gain a whole lot of detail. The webinar is just for 30 minutes and we'll go through all of what it takes, through the study route means to getting into Ireland and the various, benefits available. Now, like I always would say, study abroad isn't just education; it is a relocation pathway. And if you're going for school, you know, yes, some people may want to come back, but at the same time too, there are those who are using the process not just for schooling also, but also to relocate to a country. Now that is what it's about. And of course, it's obvious they are not in oblivion of not knowing that's what's happening because Canada, like places like Canada, US, Ireland, UK, they all have the same they know the same thing. They know, oh, yes, African, Asia, they would want to come to their country and they come through this means. So it is not an issue at all. So you can use this pathway to relocate, to these countries, especially like we're talking about Ireland. Now, throughout this webinar, we'll look at four parts of the webinar. We're going to look at the overview, which is, talking about Ireland and, the benefits of use studying Ireland and even afterwards. Secondly, we're going to look at this school admission process. We're going to look at the visa application process. And then we're also going to look at the financial cost implication. Now, these are the four different parts of the webinar. Now, starting with the overview, right, about Ireland. So Ireland actually is a country in Europe. Remember, there's a difference between Ireland and Northern Ireland. Northern Ireland is in the UK, then Ireland is actually in the EU. That means European Union. It's one of the countries in the European Union. Is in Europe. And then Northern Ireland, like I said, is in the UK. Now, for the Ireland being in Europe, we're also looking at several. It shares borders with several other countries too, and of course, even very emphatically, you can go to other countries, in Europe, based on you being in Ireland. So it opens doors for you to either relocate or to visit other European countries. Also, the climate there is good. I mean, very beautiful, but not as even as cold as it is in the UK. So it's so okay. Security wise, beautiful. Economy wise, too, awesome because it's rated to be the third largest economy in the EU. That means in Europe, and then of course 12th largest, in the world. So Ireland is really beautiful in terms of staying. There was even a statistic that even showed that the unemployment ratio there, the unemployment rate there is at 4%. Think about it, 4% unemployment rate. In other words, jobs are highly available in Ireland. So when it comes to you schooling and working, there's no problem. Or even after you're done schooling, for you to get a job, it is not, it's not a problem at all. So there's always job available, whether you're schooling or after you're schooling, there's job available. And another thing, important detail is that even in the job market, right, the average annual salary, in Ireland, anyone could earn in Ireland between 45,000 to 58,000 euros. I mean, that's really remarkable. 45,000 to 58,000 euros. So you get to find out that there are a lot of opportunities there. And like I said earlier in the video, the permanent residency pathway too is also a good drive now for going to Ireland. So after 2 years of schooling, or after 2 years of rather being in Ireland, you can get a permanent residency. Now, it is for some people. We're going to talk about it, during the course of this webinar. So stay back and let's take you through all of what we have for it's just for 30 minutes, and you're going to get a lot. And of course, if you're interested, you can really let us know. Let us get you started. But apart from that, if you have any question, you can write it on the comment, or you can even send us a message. We can give you all of more details, right? Now, looking at that, looking at the next thing that we have, remember we said the overview, we talked about Ireland and some other things too. We can't really say everything now, right? We're just picking out the major important detail, to tell you, and then you can then know how you want to go about it in terms of your planning or in terms of your decision making. That would really help you to having a good decision in in relocating to Ireland. The second thing we want to look at is the school admission process. Now, for school admission process, there are several programs you can apply for, in schools in Ireland. We have partnering schools in Ireland that, we have a very seamless admission process with. So you don't have any problem with that. So you can consider, maybe you want to apply for a bachelor degree, or you want to apply for a postgraduate diploma, higher diploma, or even a master's program. You can try to apply for all of these kind of programs depending on what you have, right? When you send us a message, when people send us a message, we always want to first know if they have the documents available. And if you have the documents available, send it to us so that we can do a school search for you based on what you have, in order for you to get the right school or the right course that tailors with or what you already have. Now, first, I'm going to look at the documents, right? Now, for bachelor degree, for those who would want to apply for a bachelor degree, now the basic documents for you to have is your WAEC certificate or your NECO certificate, or and also you can also alongside with it is a reference letter, a statement of purpose, or letter of intent, or motivational letter, as it may be called. You need to have those, and then your proficiency test. A English proficiency test is mandatory. You need to have your English proficiency test. Now, there are several proficiency tests like IELTS, that's the International English Language Test System. There's the Duolingo, there's the Pearson Test of English. So all of this is accepted. You can provide them. It's mandatory that you have it, for your bachelor degree application. Then for your master's degree, right, you're also looking at the same detail like I mentioned for the bachelor degree, plus you need to provide your certificate, for your that's your bachelor degree certificate, and also your transcript also, that would be needed for your application. Now, something I need to say about your application for bachelor's degree. For bachelor degree, right, you would have to show a post-secondary, 1 year post-secondary qualification, right? 1 year post-secondary qualification. Now, that's important, that's needed in terms of you applying for a bachelor degree in Ireland, but it depends on some courses, and with some courses, maybe your WAEC and your NECO would suffice. You don't really need to, especially if you really have a good result in your WAEC, that would really go a long way. But if not, then you have to provide the 1 year post-secondary qualification. And of course, it depends on the course too, because some courses would also of necessity require that you give them a 1 year post-secondary qualification. Now, this 1 year post-secondary qualification means, like, let's say, maybe you did an A level, or maybe you actually did a 1 year schooling, maybe in a university, or maybe or even an OND, right? So that could also help your application. Okay. Now, another for the master's program, right? You don't really need to show any more apart from the documentation, right? Just your documents, and that will be okay. And and also there's also the postgraduate diploma. You can also apply for a postgraduate diploma. Now, for postgraduate diploma, actually, more of what postgraduate diploma would entail, is that you can use it to do a conversion. Maybe let's say you actually studied a business management, and then you want to do something like data analytics. So, postgraduate diploma would help you to convert from business management to data analytics. You see that? So it makes your switch very, very simple, and that would really happen. So that's basically for the postgraduate. But it doesn't now mean that anybody cannot apply for a postgraduate diploma apart from this. No, you can. Anyone can apply for a postgraduate diploma. Even postgraduate diploma is quite cheaper compared to the master's program. You see, compared to the master's program. So that's basically it. When it comes to the school admission process. Now, for school admission process, the way we do it is firstly we do a school search. We give you schools that you can really apply to based on what you have, because somehow everybody's CGPA, differs, right? So with what you have in your CGPA, depending on the school, because some schools, have a benchmark of CGPA they will want to take, not just for it to be a 2-1 or a 2-2, but even in the 2-1 or 2-2, at least, depending on what the school will take, there's already a benchmark of what they cannot, of what they would not take. For some schools, they may say, 3.2. Some may even say 2.5, depending. So it actually varies. So with that, we can now know schools that we can really, you can really apply to based on what you have, in applying to schools in Ireland. Now, so your CGPA is highly important. That will really give the good result of what schools that will best suit your application process. Then another thing also you need to note is the tuition. The tuition in schools in Ireland are not so, high, especially the ones that we're partnered with. You can even have tuition fees of even about 4,000 plus euros. You can have 6,000, 7,000, and even maybe up to 10 to 13 and more thousand euros, right? But nonetheless, anyway, it actually depends on some factors, maybe the school or maybe the program you're going for, But when you're looking at programs, courses that has to do with STEM related courses like science, tech, engineering, mathematics, usually you get to find out that these courses are quite high, in terms of tuition. So you can actually, you can even, it's even an advantage if you try to study, on this kind of courses, right? You should study them. It gives you, in fact, that's even what gives you the PR pathway we're talking about, the permanent residency pathway we're talking about. But I'll get into it very, very soon. Now, so that's it for the school admission process. In your school admission application too, you can also get a scholarship. You can get a scholarship. Now, we don't really like to talk about scholarship because it's actually the school has the prerogative, right, to giving scholarships. So just because they gave for last intake does not mean they will give for the next intake. So it's actually their prerogative. So it's up to them too. But usually scholarship comes and they give it, especially for students that have merit, when they see some kind of your excellence that you already have, maybe your certificate, for example, someone who is going for masters, and then they are seeing maybe you had a first class 2-1, depending, that could give you an advantage for you to having a scholarship, depending on the school and how they want to do what they need to do, they want to do. So that can happen. But also another thing also is that we can also get scholarship if you can meet up with some deadlines, maybe in terms of tuition payment, right? If you can meet up with tuition payment before so and so time, the school can give you a scholarship on that. School scholarship really, don't see it as a full scholarship, right? They can give you, maybe if for some reason you have to pay, let's say 10,000, you can pay 8,000, you can pay 7,000. So that's how school scholarship can be, right? But that's really can go a long way to reduce the amount you need to pay. And think about it, if your course is more than 1 year, the scholarship can even go, on every year for you. All right. So that's basically it for the school admission process, right? But to conclude with the school admission process, now the intake period is usually in the month of September, but some schools have intake period in January, right? So some schools have intake period in January, but most schools usually September, always in September. Now, if this year has eluded you, you can even look forward to next year, right? Maybe fewer schools that open up for admission for intake period for January, then you can apply to them, or even in September, then you can stick with it. Now, it's not when it comes to school admission process, it's not something you do or rather study abroad, process. It's not something you do in a hurry. You can give time to make your plan. In fact, most schools have already opened up for September 2025. You see, so most schools open up for 1 year ahead. For you to apply for school application. So it's not late. You can begin right now and then start up your journey. And then another important detail is the turnaround period in terms of getting school admission. Now, school admission, now for the most part, right, averagely takes between 1 to 3 weeks for you to get in your school admission offer letter. Okay, so it doesn't really take so much time. Within 1 to 3 weeks, you've got to your offer letter. So that's basically it for the school process, right? So for us, with us, we can, if you have your documents already available, you can send it to us. We do a school search for you, and then we begin your application, and then we give you, we of course follow up on your application, and then once your offer letter comes out, then you can now proceed to the next step. Now, which is where we are getting into at this time. So I'm not so sure if there are any questions already, but we're looking at, so remember, we've talked about the school admission process. Now, the next thing we want to look at is the visa application. Now, for the visa application, I hope I'm not rushing this thing. So let me just take my time. For the visa application process, right, we're going to be looking at several things. Now, in terms of applying for visa, right, it's important that there are some guidelines already, which I have mentioned and which I'll soon mention, but there are some guidelines for visa. For example, like I mentioned earlier about in school admission, maybe if you're applying for a bachelor degree, you need to show that you have a post-secondary qualification, right? That is important, right? It's also part of visa required for visa, right? Except maybe depending on the course that you already have, then that may not really be needed. But nonetheless, also when you're looking at tuition payment, now tuition payment for schools in Ireland, according to visa requirement, it is shown that you have to pay at least 6,000 euros. Okay, at least 6,000 euros for tuition deposit. Okay, for tuition deposit. Now, this is a visa requirement. Now, let me explain this. Okay, let me explain this. I'm just trying to point out some of the guidelines, then I will go into some other detail concerning the visa process. Okay, but these ones are very integral because I have discussed about them before. So let me just talk about it in terms of the visa requirement, right? Then we'll now go into other stuffs. Now, firstly, like I said, right, the 1 year post-secondary qualification, right? And the second one I'm now mentioning is actually the 6,000 euros of tuition deposit that you have to pay. I now said it's a visa requirement, right? You have to fulfill this now, but I want to explain on this. What it simply means is that if your school fees is more than 6,000 euros, you have to pay at least tuition fee of 6,000. Even if the school tells you to pay less, okay, maybe your offer letter, you're seeing that you should pay maybe 4,000 plus first semester tuition fee. But for visa application, you have to have paid 6,000 euros. At least international students have to pay 6,000 euros for tuition deposit. Now, if your tuition is not up to 6,000 euros, then you have to pay the full tuition. Let's suppose your tuition fee is 4,500 euros. Then you have to pay the 4,500 euros totally, for your tuition, completely, for your tuition. So since it's not up to 6,000 euros, so that is one of the visa guidelines, which is required for a visa application. Then, of course, other things concerning visa application is that you would have to have, gotten a letter of enrollment, right, from the school, right? Just like what Canada will call letter of acceptance, or maybe the US will call I-20, so, or the UK will call CAS, that's CAS, Certificate of Acceptance to Study. So you need to have that's a prerequisite document you need to have, for your visa application. Then, of course, another important detail is the tuition, like I talked about, your financial document. So first of all, the receipt of your school fees, that you pay this amount for tuition deposit, and then secondly, your proof of funds. Now, for Ireland, actually, proof of funds varies, right? Now, proof of fund. Now, what I mean it varies. That's when it comes to the living expense and the tuition, because tuition fee is not the same. Now, it depends on what your tuition fee is. But in terms of you showing proof of funds, you need to show proof of funds of your living expense and your tuition, the remaining balance of your tuition. Okay, so let's suppose your tuition balance is 10,000 euros, and you pay 6,000. So the 4,000 euros remaining plus your living expense. Now, if you're living in Dublin, your living expense is about 12,000 euros, right? And then if you're living outside Dublin, then you need to budget 9 to 10,000 euros. But I would want you to stick with 10,000 euros for your living expense. So you show that in your bank statement, for 6 months bank statement. Actually, Ireland does not have the stipulated number of months you need to show proof of funds, just like the UK would do. UK would tell you 28 days within one calendar month, or maybe Canada would say at least 4 months. Ireland does not really have a stipulated number of period, but it's good that you show 6 months bank statement that has the money in the account. Okay, it doesn't mean that it has to be there monthly. Cumulatively, the money has to be in the account. Then you show the 6 months bank statement. Now, which means you have to have calculated the living expense and the remaining balance of your tuition, right? And then another important document for your visa application will be your proficiency test, your English proficiency test, right? So the same English proficiency test you use in getting school admission, you will have to use too in getting your visa. Then, of course, another document will now be your academic documents and some other miscellaneous documents too, like maybe, like, let's say, medical insurance. For other countries, you have to go for a medical test, but for Ireland, you have to obtain a medical insurance. I mean, you have to buy a medical insurance, and medical insurance maybe there are some already, will I say, accredited now, or maybe approved, okay, medical insurance that they would want to take. Okay, so you need to note that, and then get the medical insurance based on those approved, insurance companies. Okay, and maybe the range could be between 200 euros to 500 euros, right? So you get that readily available before your application. Then, in making your application, all other documents, your documents rather for application, has to be photocopied. You don't need to submit the original, right? You can just photocopy them in colored and then submit with your original, right? International passport, right? You submit it for your visa application. Then, of course, all other details in terms of checking up your visa response, those ones are something we can actually do. There's already a place for that. Now, another thing to also note is the visa fee and the biometrics fee. Now, for the visa fee is 60 euros, and then the biometrics fee is $29, right? $29. So that's what you'd. So I'm even actually talking about the financial cost, but I will still get to it very well. But these are the expenses you will make in your visa application, right? So that's basically what your visa application would entail. So the documentation, and then the filing of your documents, what is required, the various things that are required, following the visa guidelines, and then, submitting up your application. Then, of course, the process for your getting a decision will take 8 weeks, right? It takes 8 weeks for you to get a decision, from the visa officer on your application. Now, of course, if you're planning to come with dependents, you cannot come with dependents for study in Ireland. But the good thing is, after maybe, let's say, imagine you're going for a 1 year master's program. Then, after your 1 year master's program, you've gotten a job, you can then, by reason of your temporary visa, right, work visa, you can then invite, not just invite, but you can bring over your dependent, that's your spouse, to Ireland. So it is totally allowed, right? But for you to come with your spouse for schooling, you can't do that, right? You can't do that. It won't. You can't go with your dependent, just you. So, but there's no difference anyway. I mean, it's just 1 year period for you to just stay without, and then you bring over. Then the big one before I talk about the financial cost implication is the PR pathway, right? The PR pathway for international students. Now um what I mean by PR would mean permanent residency. Sometimes some people um, maybe may not really understand what I'm talking about. Let me explain these two things, right? The postgraduate work permit and then the permanent residency. Permanent, okay. And then another important detail is the PR, like I talked about, the permanent residency. Permanent residency means that you are almost becoming a citizen of the country. You see, so in other words, you have temporary residence would mean, okay, you have to renew your staying in the country. But if you have a permanent residency, what it simply means is that I don't need to renew anything again. I don't need to renew my residence again. And that would also put you, ahead of that, put you in the route of getting or becoming a citizen of that country, depending on the laws of being a citizenship. But permanent residency, with it, you can come in and out of the country without restrictions, right? So there is already a pathway for international students to obtaining a permanent residency, especially for those. Now, it's not for all students anyway, but it's for those students who would go into the STEM field. That means the science, tech, engineering, and mathematics field. So going into that field will give you the advantage of getting the permanent residency. Now, after 2 years of being in Ireland, this is big. I mean, this should be the one of the reasons why you should even come to Ireland, because I mean, after 2 years of being in Ireland, you can process for a permanent residency and you get it. So if you're studying courses like let's say in the science sector, maybe the health sciences, and some other bio science that has to do with maybe research work or maybe biotechnology and all of that, you have an advantage. Or maybe you're studying things like tech, like data analytics, big cloud data management, cloud computing, artificial intelligence. All of these things can really give you a good advantage to coming to Canada and obtaining your PR within 2 years, or after 2 years of you being in Canada, in Ireland rather, not Canada. What am I saying? In Ireland. So, and then finally, the financial costs, right? The financial cost implication. Now, for the financial cost implication, we're looking at now the first thing is your tuition, right? Now, your tuition is actually the huge part of this, right? That's what's taking where the money is, right? Because you're going to pay at least, remember, if your tuition is more than 6,000 euros, you have to pay at least 6,000 euros. Or if it's lesser than 6,000 euros, then you have to pay completely the tuition fee. Then the second thing is the proof of funds, right? In terms of your living expense and the remaining balance of your school fees. So you need to show the remaining balance of your school fees and your living expense in your account, okay, in your bank statement. Of course, you're not traveling with it. It's in your bank statement. You're showing the proof of funds. Now, I'm not doing the calculation to give you the total, but I'm doing the calculation so that you can know where the big money is being spent or where you're going to be spending money in, because it varies. There's a variance in terms of tuition and in terms of other things too. Then the second thing also, it's the now the first one, remember, another important where you'll be spending money on again, maybe application fee. If the school requests for an application fee in terms of your school admission process, you have to spend money on that one. Okay, so what's the question? Okay, with which visa? Okay, so like I said earlier, right, you can't travel for island study route. You can't travel with your spouse, right? After 1 year of study, maybe for instance, if you travel, if you apply for a master's program, then after your 1 year master degree, you can obtain a temporary work visa. Then with that visa, you can then bring in your spouse to Ireland. So, but for you to immediately travel to Ireland with your spouse, you can't do that. Okay, that would be after your that after your study rather, you can then relocate to Canada with your spouse. Yeah. So that's any other question? Any other question? Okay. I wish I have access to it in my device here. You can get on to begin your process and then enjoy a very good um, you know enjoy yourself in all of what you're doing. Of course, spending the money is not so um, easy, but nonetheless you get the best of what you need to have. Scholarships, actually, like I said, schools give scholarship, but is up to them, right? It's their prerogative for them to give you scholarship. Okay, it's not just because they did it for the last intake doesn't mean they'll do it for the next intake. So it always comes, and you can be lucky to get something coming up very soon. However, if you have, what is really required, in terms of maybe success in your academic excellence, right?